hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. With myself, Dr. Stacey and our legal expert, Edward Picado Esquire, and Joyce Russell Esquire, who today is in the field. So we're holding it down for him, but we're excited that you are here with us and looking forward to an engaging conversation. We took a little bit of a holiday last week and excited to see you here. Hey there. Good to see you, my brother Jason. Thank you for being in the building. So we're going to go ahead and let our legal expert, Edward Pichardo Esquire, say hello to us today. Over to you.
Well, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show today. Hola, buena tarde, mi gente. Nice to have you here today. I believe that you're going to find a lot of the information that we share with you today, this afternoon, quite fulfilling as well as, or hopefully rather, inspirational. So, welcome.
Absolutely. And of course, Mr. Russell sends his regards as well.
Absolutely.
And we have quite a bit to discuss today. And, we always start off with recognizing those who transitioned. Usually we're talking about those within our community, but sometimes it's a little bit broader than that when it's someone who is as significant as who we're going to recognize today. Madeleine Albright was the first female U.S. Secretary of State, and she has transitioned at, I believe she was, 80?
Four, I believe.
Or yes. So, it was trailblazing, the work that she did and what she represented for women. It still is Women's History Month. So we want to celebrate her life as many tributes are pouring in to Madeleine Albright, the Honorable Madeleine Albright. And we are grateful for what she did with helping to steer foreign policy during the Cold War. It was cancer, unfortunately, that she lost her battle to, but she won the battle for the work that she did and her legacy that will live on.
Yeah, I mean, she was at the time of her appointment. My understanding is that she was the highest-ranking woman in history. The title of U.S. Secretary of State is huge. You're basically you're basically in charge of foreign policy for the United States, which arguably is in currently a unipolar world, the greatest power on earth, and to have that level of influence was tremendous, for a woman. And she basically, opened the door for other women to become Secretary of State. So, may she rest in power. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And this month is clearly not long enough to talk about all of what we have going through as women, still fighting for equal pay. The work still continues, and we're going to be celebrating and talking about the historic confirmation hearings that are happening right now for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. But before we get there, we have a few other stories that we are going to touch on. And like you said, rest in power to Madeleine Albright and to all of those that she influenced, their careers and their career path, because she opened up an opportunity and a pathway that hadn't existed before. So we are definitely pleased to talk about that and what that means. But now we're going to get into some other parts of the news where, I don't know, Senor Pichado, every time something goes down with anyone that could be loosely associated with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's interesting how it's depicted. And there was yet another story that went a little viral, and that one was around alleged charges against scamming donations for a BLM activist and her husband. What is the real deal behind this, and why is that the headline that she was a BLM activist?
Well, it's interesting because when you look at this headline, you automatically say to yourself, okay, this is someone who was part of a Black Lives Matter chapter, because there are chapters throughout the country, right? Various cities various states, depending on the size of the population in the urban areas within those states. So you automatically think Black Lives Matter, oh, the organization. But the reality here is that the woman that you see in the photograph is Monica Cannon Grant, and the husband that they're talking about is her husband Clark Grant. They created an organization called Violence in Boston, and Violence in Boston, what has received support from Black Lives Matter, in terms of grants, but they also have received funding and grants from the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office because they have an anti-violence program. And of course, as some people need to understand, the district attorney's offices, they usually have funding that they have at their disposal to provide to community organizations that they want to support in terms of their mission in the community. Usually it's something that is connected to a value or a cause that those in law enforcement have, which is most of the time reducing violence in the community. And so, they also gave her a grant, but you don't see that mentioned in the headline. You see BLM, Black Lives Matter. So, it's interesting that, this is put forth that way. Of course, that doesn't excuse what is being alleged here. And by the way, they are allegations. If you read the article, you'll see that Ms. Grant and her husband are, declaring their innocence and saying basically this is a misunderstanding in terms of their alleged misuse of the funds that they received. And so, it remains to be seen whether these allegations will be proven. I will say, though, that when it comes to federal charges, a lot of times, those charges aren't brought without a very thorough and solid investigation. But nonetheless, there's a presumption of innocence here, and they'll get their day in court and their chance, hopefully, to respond to these allegations. What I would say to the community is that, hey, listen, this is, no one should stop supporting Black Lives Matter and their mission. And I mean those who already support the mission and the goals simply because they see an article like this. As the phrase goes, one person doesn't stop the show, right? And so that doesn't mean because one person is accused of doing something inappropriate, we should completely abandon the movement. I myself am a Black Lives Matter supporter. I support the mission. And so, I say let's keep trucking on, but make sure we are clear about the mission, the goals, and what we're doing here, and making sure we don't allow the media, especially, to distort the message and try to insert messages that will divide us in our unity. So, I think this is worthy of mention to our audience here today.
Absolutely. This is Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. And culturally, we know that we have many of organizations that start nonprofits, or individuals rather, that start nonprofits that have great missions. And this seems like another case of donations and misappropriation, accounting. So where's the lesson in it? They're going to have their day in court to fight for their innocence. As you said, there's that presumption. But what's the broader lesson? One, read deeper into the headlines, because this is casting aspersion on the Black Lives Matter movement, which is not the only organization that, as you stated, gave or supported their efforts. But also look into how we take care of having professionals manage our books so that we don't end up in these sorts of situations that could have started out innocently, or maybe there, as they're stating, a misunderstanding, or they didn't have the right counsel and how to make sure that everything that they're doing is accounted for. So that's the broader lesson in this whole article. It's unfortunate that it has to go through such a public forum, because it caught wind, and you should be responsible for how you utilize the intentions of what your organization was established for, but also have the right people consulting and working with you so that they can preempt these sorts of challenges and or misunderstandings. So I'm sure we'll see how this plays out. And ultimately, there were people being serviced by this nonprofit. So I hope those individuals don't suffer as a result. So that's what I'm
Absolutely.
always concerned about when these sorts of things hit the news. But we wanted
Absolutely.
to bring it up because it started to go viral. And of course, folks who have issue with the work of Black Lives Matter is using the CCC, you can't trust, or this is, not a reputable organization without reading further into the headlines. So where the legal meets the cultural, just don't read the headlines, do the research, and understand the genesis of where some of these stories are coming from.
Absolutely.
So now we're moving on to another topic that we've talked about here on the show when it comes to bail reform. But the governor of New York is in the news once again, as well as our lieutenant governor, around changes to bail reform as a part of a sweeping public safety plan. What are your thoughts on this, legal expert, Pichardo?
As we recall, I guess it was about a month and a half, 2 months ago, Mayor Eric Adams, was, being concerned with the quote unquote rising crime in New York City, started asking for certain changes to the bail reform law because the message that's getting out there in the media is that a lot of the crime that's being committed is by individuals who are taking advantage of the change in the law. Now, there's another group of individuals who will say that's just simply not true. That the change in the law is not the reason for this, but in any event, this rise in crime is clearly seems to be having a impact, if you will, on the governor's race. And so one of the concerns here is that Governor Hochul is now proposing a response to the rising crime, and the concern is that this legislation is being put forth as part of the budget. Now, the budget, has to be scheduled to be passed by April 1st. And what happens in many cases is some of the legislation that gets in it is not really related to the budget. It's tangential to it. Sometimes legislation is inserted within the budget to basically achieve other goals. And so about 2 days ago, there was a memo apparently that was obtained by the Post that discusses these changes. I haven't seen the actual legislation itself, but basically, there's like some sort of 10-point plan that's been put forth that for the most serious felonies allow bail determinations based on criminal history of firearm use, possession, that you know judges be allowed to look at some of these other factors, and make repeat offenses subject to arrest and bail eligible, make certain gun-related offenses, hate crime offenses, and subway crimes subject to arrest and not desk appearance tickets, make certain gun-related offenses bail eligible, make it easier to prosecute gun trafficking. My understanding with the gun trafficking one is that right now I believe that the threshold is 5 guns in order for you to qualify as a trafficker. They want to reduce that to 3. They want to reform the discovery statute, and we talked about that on a previous show, where the district attorney's office has to, hand over this information within a certain amount of time to the defense. They want to make some reforms to the raise the age statute, because apparently there's some messages that have been put out there that some of the children that are now being that would have been formerly prosecuted in adult court and now are in family court are carrying more guns because they know that they're not going to be going to adult court, which that one is very specious, as some of these others, quite frankly. The only one here that I'm really in favor of here is, and in all fairness, Lieutenant Brian Benjamin in his messaging, he kind of ends his discussions about this with this is an increase in funding of pretrial diversion and employment programs, and talking about 83.4 million for pretrial services, and distributing the nearly 500 million that was appropriated for raise the age implementation previously. That one, hey, listen. Oh, and also they're talking about increasing funding for mental health treatment, expand involuntary commitment in Kendra's law, and that's the law having to do with being able to involuntarily commit someone who's really mentally ill and not capable of making that decision for themselves in terms of deciding to go inpatient or to take medications. What do I think? I think, quite frankly, that the public has to really sit down and look at what's currently in the law. And I believe that if you currently look at within the law, you will see that this is more of an issue of the law being enforced as it is or being utilized as it is. It's more of an issue of spending more money on pretrial services, on the services that revolve around those who are charged in the criminal justice system. And so if you look at that, like in particular, if you look at criminal procedure law 510.10, it talks about what offenses qualify for bail. You will see in there that there are a number of offenses that qualify for bail. You'll talk about gun offenses. You'll see in there that it talks about someone who was released on their own recognizance, but offends again in violation of the conditions of their release, and those persons being able to then have bail imposed on them. It's in there already. The problem here is that you got a lot of information that's getting out there that's not totally accurate. You have a lot of, in my view, a lot of numbers being spun. To be honest, I really believe that the Democrat dominated legislature, meaning both in the Senate as well as the Assembly, are not going for it. From what I've heard from the leaders in both houses, they're fine with the law as is. I would imagine that they're not going to oppose increased funding for services. And when am I talking about services? I'm talking about someone who's charged with an offense, right? Let's say drugs. And the judge says, you know what, I'm going to release you on your own recognizance, but you have to attend this drug treatment program. The question is, does that drug treatment program have enough counselors? Do they have the resources to continue to be able to follow up with this individual? See, because the bottom line here is when somebody is charged with an offense, the issue is whether or not they're going to return to court. Not that dangerousness, but whether they're going to return to court. The operative language in criminal procedure law, section 500.10 is under conditions ordered by the court, which shall be the least restrictive conditions that will reasonably assure the principal's compliance with court conditions. That's what we're talking about here. People returning to court. Okay, we're not, and there are other conditions that are, if it's a domestic violence case, you have a no contact order, right? If it has to do with guns, if you do have guns in the home, removal. If we're concerned that you're going to flee, taking your passport. If you get charged with another crime while you're out, then okay, at that point the judge will say, hey, listen, I let you out the first time, you offended again. Okay, now we're gonna do bail. Now you're gonna have to do this, or I'm gonna impose other conditions. The judge may say, hey, you know what? We're gonna do electronic monitoring here, so that we can assure that you are where you are supposed to be. Once again, resources, right? Because you have to have somebody that looks at that electronic monitoring device to make sure that individual is where they're supposed to be. Let's say you got a young person in family court? Does the Department of Probation have enough resources to be able to follow up with that young person to make sure that they're attending school? If that's, or most more than likely, that would be a condition of release. Is that person attending? Do they have enough staff to check in with the school? And I'm not saying, of course, don't get me wrong here. I was a defense attorney for many years and am now. I started out as a public defender. I don't think any of these things should be applied in a draconian, a harsh manner. I believe in second chances. I believe that if someone violates the conditions of their bail, that person should be entitled to explain the reasons why, and be possibly given a second chance. But a lot of the concerns here that are being highlighted, they make it seem as if there is no mechanism within the current law for dealing with some of the issues that the public is concerned about. In terms of repeat offenders and people being out, we need to examine each particular case and find out, well, why was this person out of custody? What were they charged with? Are they on probation? Are they on parole? Could that have been revoked? When is the last time they checked in with their PO? Does the Department of Probation have enough resources to make sure to follow up with these individuals? Enough social workers, enough counselors? We need to look at all of those things before we start saying, "Oh, we need to change the law. We need to change the law." And so that's one of the concerns here. I think a lot of it is politically motivated, and it's a bit concerning. I do hope that those political motivations lead to increased funding and increased resources for those who really want to serve this community and not just lock people up, which really, at the end of the day, isn't the answer, and is of huge cost to the community insofar as the expenditure of one's taxes, right? Who wants to spend money on keeping someone locked up when you can spend money on making sure somebody gets an education or gets help for whatever problem that they have?
And I think that's the part that I hope gets highlighted even more when we talk about the fulfillment. How is that being sustained and funded? You make great points, because if you set up certain protocols and then you don't have enough people to supply what is needed, it's like you're setting it up to fail. So we shouldn't be wasting money, and we need to be making investments in the areas that will really create the change that's required. So it's political season. There's a lot at stake for what's introduced, what's passed, and it'll be interesting to see what the legislature does do around this, because it's not a new topic, and there's quite a bit of work that still needs to be done, but one that we need to be aware of. And for those organizations, kudos to the organizations that are advocating and sharing where the disparities lie in how our current system operates. You don't have to know everything. You just need to know enough people who know about something that we can get the word out there. And hey, Kevin, hey, Tasha, thank you for being here. And Kevin, yes, we're going to talk about the confirmation earrings, but that's like the juicy part at the end. We're leading up to that with just making sure we're keeping the community abreast of what's happening. And we talk a lot about what's going on in New York because the country watches what happens in New York, and it affects certain legislation and reform opportunities across the country. So this is one that, we've even talked about here on the show, some of the implications around this whole bail reform. We spent some time, if you go back a few episodes, but let's continue to watch this
Yeah.
unfold.
And people need to continue to be reminded about the case of Khalif Browder, and people need to maybe start watching again 13th Amendment by Ava DuVernay. And once they need to look at that, because that's what we were dealing with before.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what we were dealing with before. I mean, and we need to remind ourselves of that. We need to remind ourselves. Okay.
And that's, we love to be entertained, which there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also educate. What do we call it? Educainment, educate and entertainment. Trying to merge the two. Clearly, I was
Edutainment,
butchering
yeah.
it. Edutainment. Yeah, I was one of the two. But you know what the point is, people. You have to read something before you need something, as Mr. Russell likes to say, but also view content like what Ava DuVernay put together in the 13th Amendment, because it was very well done and very thorough, going through the historical context of where our amendments and our laws and everything that we've been operating in and with. So if you haven't seen it, it's also a great opportunity for you to have a young person watch it with you and really discuss where we are, current day, with all that we see happening. Hey, Reggie, thank you for tuning in as well. So, we're going to continue with some more news in the good old NYC.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There we
This
go.
yeah, this has been a concern for years. One of the particular targets of this lawsuit is the collection of DNA samples that are sometimes collected by the NYPD, and the prosecution doesn't even go forward, or the person isn't ultimately convicted, but they sit in some database somewhere. And sometimes, and people don't know this, sometimes when you are arrested and you have that meeting with that police officer in that station after you've been arrested, where they do the quote unquote interrogation, and they'll ask you, well, do you want a soda, do you want a cup of coffee, do you want a cigarette?
Hmm.
And people don't know that after they drink that coffee, drink that soda, smoke that cigarette, and they leave it in that ashtray or that cup, right after they leave the room, that officer puts that in an envelope and sends that to a lab because it has DNA on it. And that DNA is, then put into some database. And this is a part of you. And it's, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong, that method has led to the solving of many a crime, and you have people definitely that have been victimized, murdered, otherwise shot, whatever, and that's the way they're able to make the case. But the manner in which this is being done, surreptitiously, and the folks who are doing, who have filed this lawsuit, are concerned that there was some years back, there was a promise by the NYPD to, get rid of some of these samples where it was inappropriate to keep them, in terms of no conviction, no charge, or an otherwise favorable disposition of the case. But that apparently has not taken place. And so it's now, the NYPD, as in many cases, is now, those who want this done are now attempting to get a court to mandate it. And so this is going to be very interesting to watch, because in the age of technology, we're already overly surveilled, right? There's cameras anywhere now. They also got your DNA. So this is one to watch. This is definitely an interesting one that we should keep a close eye on. As the article mentions, we're talking about DNA samples of nearly 32,000 people, and we're not talking about just adults. We're talking about children as well.
That part, it's when we think about historically what has happened when it's been used the wrong way, that there's certain things that really get me unnerved, and I'm so concerned about what the implication of 32,000 people having DNA samples that have not been legally obtained. That is a problem. It is a problem, especially for young people.
And there's also, and there's also a related issue, because this is talking about the DNA database. I'm not going to talk about this today, but people also should be looking at this gang database too, because the NYPD also maintains a database of those who are affiliated with gangs. And so and sometimes that information is not accurate, or it's outdated, or just simply not correct. And a lot of the same folks that are concerned about this are concerned about that as well. Because sometimes a young person will end up in that database simply because they're friends with somebody who actually is affiliated, and God forbid, one of our children just happens to go to school and is friends with someone who is, in the mix, and some photographs are taken, and all of a sudden now, your young person is part of that when they're really not.
And that's the real, this is where the legal meets the cultural. Culturally, we know that that happens, right? Kids get caught up, guilty by association. So where's the oversight for these things? Where's the oversight on the DNA? Where's the oversight on this database for gangs? Those are the questions that we need to be raising, because it's affecting people in our community.
And how many times will you hear about some young person getting hurt or something happening, and there's like some place in the article, oh, reportedly gang affiliated, and the parents and the family like, that's not true. That's just simply not true. And as someone who grew up in the neighborhood, if you grow up in the neighborhood and you go to a neighborhood school and there are other kids that are involved in things that you're not, you know, yeah, sure, you could be seen, eating a slice of pizza with that person, or
Mhm.
playing a game of basketball or something, or just simply talking to that person. And really, at the end of the day, is because you have to, in order for you to even survive in that community. You're not going to be running around, well, I can't talk to you because, you down with this or that. That's just simply not realistic. There you can live in the neighborhood and know individuals who are involved in certain activities and not be part of that.
And only we understand that, right? So this is where the legal meets the culture, where we understand what that looks like, what it is. You have to separate conversations about choices that people are making in the community, but the point is you still live in the community with them. So,
Exactly.
to have what this article says, a database that turns thousands of people, primarily Black and Latino, into permanent criminal suspects. That's
Exactly.
literally what the fight is about, and what we should know about as a community that's happening, because I bet you the average person doesn't even realize how much this is a problem for that DNA to be unprotected and no oversight. Like, this is an issue.
Yeah, and it's a part of you. It's an identifying mark of you. It's part of your own biological material, and it shouldn't just be
Absolutely.
sitting in somebody's database without your permission.
At the least, without your permission, right? Because we know that they're databases for different things. So, we've been saving for the latter part of the show to really get into the hearings. As you can see, it's flashing across the screen while we're talking about the NYPD and illegally obtaining and storing the DNA samples of citizens here. But as we watch this, before I bring up just some points on day 2 that was shared in the Washington Post, I wanted to take a moment to just circle back on what we shared with Ava DuVernay, right? And 13th, and going to see it. There's really no excuse of looking at it, because it's available on YouTube, right? I'm going to put the link in the chat. So those of you who like, wait, I would love to see it, I didn't know about it, you can go on YouTube and watch it with friends, family, young people. Just have a dialogue about where we are in this country as a result of knowing the historical context. So I found this and wanted to share that with all of our viewing audience, those who are watching live, those who are catching the replay, because it's a great full feature to just be a little bit more knowledgeable about how things have evolved and are continuing to evolve as we see history happening in real time with these confirmation hearings. So I wanted to share that. So now we're going to get into what we have been hearing about, seeing happening in real time, and it's Women's History Month. So, of course, we are super proud of the fact that we have this ability to witness what we see happening here in our country, and that when I think about my nieces, Ed, and you think about your daughter, I'm sure Royce is saying the same thing with his daughter,
Yes.
watching what's happening. We are a part of history. This will be in the history books. She will be someone that is referenced for decades and centuries to come. And I saw this article in the Washington Post, and I thought it was interesting how they started to analyze what happened on day two. And of course, this was published yesterday. But even today, as she continues to be questioned, I want to say, Your Honor, you are a woman of class, of dignity,
Uh,
of style. Not many of us know how to govern ourselves accordingly when faced with just complete foolishness, for lack of a better description. That she is more qualified than I would dare say a majority of those who are sitting on the committee. But that's just my personal opinion. I know they have their expertise and I'm not taking anything away, but the woman's credentials speak for itself. And the fact that she has to be asked some very insulting questions just it unnerves me. And I just want to publicly state that she is a woman of class and distinction, to carry herself, to temper her words and her responses, to govern her facial reactions and body language going through these confirmation hearings. And as a Black woman, I was crying tears of joy listening to her articulate her thoughts and ideas, answer the question, watching her husband's reaction of wiping away tears as she was talking, her daughters looking, her parents sitting there seeing their child after what they went through, the history of their family. It's just a wonderful day. And I don't want foolish questions taking away from the magnitude of the moment as we watch her story unfold. So I just want to say that before we get into the takeaways.
oh no, I mean she's certainly been a lesson in poise. I mean,
Mm.
for everybody watching, I think the major lesson here is watching the depravity of your enemies, how desperate they are to try to score some points or try to rattle her, and her ability to just withstand and be patient with some of these questions and these challenges, is absolutely amazing. She's definitely a testament to the proverb, think before you speak, right? Because
Oh,
at one point, she was asked about a book at I think it's the Georgetown Day School, a school where her children either currently attend or attend. I believe she's on the board of trustees. And Senator Ted Cruz pulls out some book and he asks her, well, what do you think? And she stopped. You could tell she thought about what she was going to respond with before she responded, and it was like, wow, this is amazing, and you could tell she was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Why am I being, what does this have to do with my qualifications as a judge on the Supreme Court, as a justice on the Supreme Court? What does it have to do with this? But at the end of the day, they're trying to pull out all the stops. At one point, what is it? Senator Blackburn asks her to define what a woman is, to try to see if she can get her to say something that will be, offensive to the LGBTQ community. I mean, it hasn't stopped. I mean, one of the most interesting things I saw yesterday was when they asked her about her characterization in some sort of brief or statement she made as a federal public defender regarding former President George Bush, and referring to him as being a war criminal in terms of some of the excesses that occurred following 9/11. And she was representing a prisoner in Guantanamo Bay apparently. And I then heard a discussion by a fact checker who talks about how that isn't really in any briefs, but she answered it well. And one of the biggest things there is that even if she did say that, as a defense attorney, you have an oath to be a zealous advocate. You do what you have to do to represent your client. Okay. And, when she was asked, well, why would you say something like that? It's like, what are you talking about? This is during the course of my representation as a public defender. We don't get to choose our clients. I used to be a public defender. You don't get to choose your clients. When I was a public defender, you went to a place called intake. There were a stack of files. You grabbed them and you did what you had to do, and you represented your clients. And if you're in a law firm, the partners give you those files and you move forward unless there's some conflict of interest or some real reason for why you can't take that case. You take it and you move on and you do your job, and that's what it's about. I also heard the really particularly controversial one where they were trying to characterize her as a friend of child sex offenders and pedophiles, and saying, oh, as a judge, this was the maximum and you did less than the maximum by this much and this much. And what the judge pointed out was, well, you're not including any of the factors that a judge is mandated to look at or discuss during sentencing before imposing a sentence. In federal court, they have what's called the sentencing guidelines, and they have these ranges. And so, the judge sentences within that range, and that range is guided by a number of factors that have to be considered. Okay. And so defense attorneys like me and Royce will say, hey, listen, my client deserves this lower sentence or probation because of these factors. And you do a sentencing memorandum. And another thing that wasn't discussed by the senator when quizzing her about this is also the recommendations that are made by the Department of Probation, which makes a recommendation to the court based on an interview of the accused and other records and prior history and so forth, and that recommendation is made to the court. And my understanding is that when that was analyzed by the fact checkers, her sentences were right in line with that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this characterization of her as a parent, which is so sad. I mean, here she has her daughters attending this hearing. She's a family woman. She's a woman of faith. How you gonna do that to her? Just because you're desperately either trying to score some points with your constituency in your state, or you're trying to figure out a way to see if you can rattle her by coming up with this stuff. But you know what? She was cool as a fan, and
poised,
and she boom, boom, boom. She laid them on them. And by the way, for folks that want to do their own research, you want to look at 18 U.S. Code section 3553, which is where they talk about a lot of these factors. Okay, and in particular, I saw one where they were asking her about a case where she made some comments in her sentencing regarding the defendant and how unfortunate this conviction was going to be. And she said, you know what? I don't have that case right in front of me, but if I recall, this was a very young man who apparently got pulled into something and now was gonna, suffer the consequences behind it. And I felt it important. And I had to talk about this because the defense attorney was asking for probation. And so she very deftly, dealt with this issue. You could tell the senator was like, he's looking through his notes, trying to figure out how to come back, because he thought he had her. He was like, he was quoting directly from her decision, and and he said, well, to your benefit, you did talk about how heinous this was.
And let's if we do any more direct quotes, my pressure will go up again, because it's just, are you kidding me? And Reggie is saying that he's trying to cook, but we're making him burn his food. Sorry, Reggie. That's because you didn't invite us to dinner. No, but I hope dinner is good. Thank you for tuning in. But, she is a thorough person. Yeah. They're all talking about how long her decisions are, because of how thorough she is with looking at everything when making a decision. She's not new to this. This is where the cultural and legal meet, right? She's true to this. She understands how to govern and be impartial and truly do what the law calls us to do when you're in these positions. And they're trying to find and fish for whatever they can to bait her into some discourse that will let her either appear to be not ready or something unfavorable, but she's smarter than that.
And she's been endorsed by law enforcement organizations. She's been endorsed. You have many Republican senators who are in her favor. And unlike Amy Coney Barrett, the one of the
Mhm.
other female justices on the court, she is more experienced than most of the justices on the court as a trial attorney and a judge. And just so you understand the difference, a lot of lawyers do not get the chance to try a case to verdict. Okay, that's big. You have a lot of lawyers who are lawyers, well respected, have been lawyers for years, law firms, practice, but don't try cases. Okay, she's tried cases. She's been in the courtroom, and she's been on the bench. You see, so and an appellate. So she's like been
Well rounded.
in all of these places, and so she got her bona fides, as we would say, in terms of as an attorney, insofar as experience is concerned. And so so for that very reason, you see how desperate they are, because it's hard. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. Let's come up with stuff. Let's ask ridiculous questions and
Making it
see what
up.
happens. But you know what? She's handling herself. She's poised. And I always say that when your enemies are so hell bent and so energetic and trying so hard, that means you doing something. That
That
means
means
you're doing something
look,
real. That
oh
means
look,
that they're afraid and scared.
let
If
me
you
let
look
me
at
let me drop a that means you're doing something. That's a telltale sign of what the attacks are. And it's just shameful because it's just showing up those who have nothing of substance to ask. But,
yeah,
these hearings cost money. It's
and
taxpayer dollars.
yeah, and just to make a quick point, if the audience will recall, our more faithful watchers, I think it was a few months ago, we did a little snippet on what some other judicial nominees are going through in terms of questioning and confirmation and vetting in some of the lower courts.
Mhm.
And I hope they are looking at Judge Brown and saying, you know what, I got to take my lessons from her when my confirmation hearing comes up, in terms of me being vetted, not maybe for the Supreme Court, but for, say, a lower court position. And here it is. This is how you do it. This is how you work it. I mean, you may not have all the qualifications and experience, but you make sure you're prepared, and you don't let some of this stuff rattle you. You
Right.
continue to keep your eyes focused on the prize.
Keep your eye on the prize. Hey, Starlet, thank you. She says she's so glad she joined the conversation today. It's a broader lesson, not just for a confirmation hearing, it's in life in general. When you are qualified to do what you've been called and put on this earth to do, and others challenge you, you don't have to fight them tooth and nail. You just stay grounded in the truth of what you represent, of who you are, and what you're delivering. And as our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, would say, when they go low, you go high. And she
Exactly.
has been staying high. She's been dignified because she's qualified. So she doesn't have to be flustered. She doesn't have to be thrown off because her record speaks for itself. She's the one who has been working the record, so she can speak to it and be able to defend whatever questions come her way. But it is definitely a broader lesson that when you know people are baiting you into a lower version of yourself, don't go for the bait. Stand up for what you know and what you believe in and how you're characterized. I think of parenting. as we tell children all the time, don't follow your friends that are doing wrong. Make your own decisions, stand on it. This is really one of those opportunities where she's showing in real time what it means to be a person of character and integrity, and to be able to, yes, Reggie, stay grounded in the truth. And it is just really wonderful. I'm just going to quickly go through as we're wrapping up the show. We've been having a good time, and it's we're almost at the end of showtime. But some of what you brought up, they highlighted as well in the Washington Post about her forceful pushback against child sex sentencing claims, which, once again, she's a mother. Oh, and then they went down to defending her role as a defender, and you touched on that, what you have to do, and you don't get to choose your clients as a public defender, but you have to do your best job in the interest of the clients, trying to pin her as a liberal. I mean, they've been pulling out everything to try to derail these confirmation hearings, and then voicing support for keeping Roe versus Wade, and the last one trying to draw her into a debate on race. Why would you even go there and trying to pull her into a debate on race? She's clearly in a multiracial marriage, right? She has two daughters who are growing up in this world. Like, why do we do some of the things that we do? But for all of the electorate who is watching their representatives in this hearing, I hope it also speaks volumes come election time, and
Yeah,
let the
no, no.
votes speak for themselves.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I mean, and and for people to look at the stark contradictions, the questions that she's getting. I mean, it's just, but it's interesting to watch, and it was to be expected, quite frankly. We knew that, she was going to have to navigate the gauntlet, if you will. you know,
We did, because we always do.
oh yeah, you knew they were gonna put her through the ringer before they let her sit on that bench. I mean, they weren't gonna make it easy. You knew that already going in. That wasn't even a question. That was a fact right there, and they're living up to the expectation. I just hope that all of these clips are kept in a vault for later use
Mhm.
when the time comes, and for our children, quite frankly, in terms of, this is what it takes, this is what we go through. Because sometimes, people forget, right? People forget what other people before them had to go through to get to certain places, and they will talk about, oh my gosh, and our parents would remind us of that, right? You would get
Exactly.
the story about how they walked a mile to get to school. You're like, a mile? Well, we don't have to
Yes.
do that now, and then they'll tell you, well, God, thank God you do, but you need to, pick up the pace or pick up the energy on something else that you find challenging. And so,
Absolutely.
so I think this is a good one. I hope that the documentary is later made about, but listen, let's not speak before it happens. Let's hope for the best. Let's pray for this sister. Let's pray
Yes.
for her to maintain her patience, to maintain her poise, to keep calm under pressure, and to do what she needs to do. And let's hope, those votes come in and she's confirmed and placed on that bench, and that nothing happens to her, because,
Exactly.
these senators and the activity that they're engaging in,
Mhm.
unfortunately, they don't understand the effect that has on some other uh, more disturbed minds. Okay, because
Exactly.
I remember about a year ago, a judge who's, I believe it was her son and her husband, who were murdered by some
Mm.
litigant who thought he could just go to her house and forcibly remove her from a case by taking her life, or was upset as to the outcome of a case. And at that point, people started realizing the danger that a lot of these federal judges are under. Now, this wasn't a Supreme Court justice, of course. This was a lower court judge, but
But even
yeah,
so,
but some of these senators, they don't understand that stuff that you're talking about, that rhetoric, all that stuff, as we say on the streets, you popping.
Yeah.
Some other people, they listen to that and they
And they think
really
it's the
believe.
truth.
Yeah, they think that, oh my God, I gotta like this child sex, offender stuff. This is real. They had a they had this, it's part of kind of that QAnon thing where they've labeled the Democrats as pedophiles. And there was one guy who went all the way to DC, ran into some pizzeria because he was told that there was a sex ring being run in the basement, out of the basement. And when he goes down there and he doesn't see anything, he's like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, there are people who actually think this stuff is real. These senators, they think that, oh, I'm just going to recklessly say these things so I can get my votes and get reelected. And, don't think, listen,
Yeah, you're putting people in harm's way.
you have a platform, you have a stage. When you say these things, there are some people that don't just watch and snicker. There are some people who think they need to act,
That's
that they
the
need to go
ugh,
ahead and do something affirmative, like all those crazies who ran to the Capitol and then found out
exactly.
that, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? And that's the problem here. A lot of this rhetoric is being very loosely put out there without thinking about the consequences. And that's what
Exactly.
kind of concerns me here. I'm watching this, I'm saying, okay, sister, do what you got to do. But, I'm also keeping my prayers for her because,
Absolutely.
this is a crazy time that we're living in. It really is.
It truly is, and we will definitely be keeping her and her family and friends covered. And as we close out the show, I want to give a shout out to Reverend Jesse Jackson. I've been a part of the Rainbow Push Wall Street Economic Summit for years. This year, my schedule didn't allow for that to happen, but he's a man with great history and has done so much over his body of work and always assembling so many together for the Wall Street Summit conversations. COVID, of course, has interrupted the way we've been able to gather and do, but I'd be remiss if I didn't shout him out and shout out Rainbow Push for the work that they continue to do, standing on the front lines of issues that are affecting our community. So this has been a great show. Starlet, thank you. Reggie, thank you. Yolanda, I see you there. We appreciate you. Tasha and Kevin and Jason and everyone else who was live, those who are catching the replay. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you just set your timers for 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays for Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. Thank you so much on behalf of Mr. Royce Russell Esquire on location today, Senor Edward Pichado, and myself, Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. Any final words, my friend, before we close out?
I just want to mention that it's interesting you pulled up that Black Economic Summit. I mean, I've attended it in the past, but I just found out the other day that I believe it's the 50th anniversary of the Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana, which was quite historic. I will welcome, our audience to look at that. That was a very historical moment where, Black folks in the, I believe it was late 60s were really talking about the stuff that we find commonplace now, back then, in terms of empowerment. So just wanted to put out that tidbit and say farewell to all and power to the people.
All right, family. See you next week. Bye bye, everyone.